Yeah, and I think that that's a really good way to sort of like usher in the Bo Nix conversation as well, right? I mean, Nix,
Mhm.
28th in the NFL this past week in week one with an average depth of target of just 6 yards. When you look at passes in which he was targeting players 10 or more yards down the field, he was only 2 for 11 with 42 yards, and all three of his turnover-worthy plays came when he tried to push the ball deep down the field. So when you think about Nix and when you think about what he did really well at Oregon, it was a lot of like shorter stuff. It was sort of understanding the construct of the offense, getting the ball in the hands of your playmakers, not just passing it to those playmakers, though, like truly giving them an opportunity to make the most of it in space, leading them correctly, like having the right timing and rhythm on screen passes or slants or routes, short routes over the middle, whatever. And Nix, I think, when people talk about average depth of target being low, I think a lot of people just assume like, oh, this means that he's like not a good quarterback. There is still elements of being a good quarterback throwing it short when you are truly allowing playmakers to shine. Now, if you're all over the place with your accuracy and your true ball placement when throwing it short, yeah, you're also probably not a good quarterback in some other areas too. But Nix at Oregon was really good at setting his players up. And this past year specifically, when he needed to hit throws that were deeper down the field, when he needed to hit NFL-type throws, if you will, he showed that he could. It just wasn't a regular thing for him. So that sort of gave me faith for him going into the league. But you mentioned, with him as well as these other guys moving forward, what does the offense now look like for Nix? Is Peyton going to ask him to continue to challenge deeper down the field? Is he going to continue to do this every single game to say, hey, you just straight up have to get better at this? Or is it going to be an offense that is much more predicated on what Nix did really well? I think that he showcased his legs as well, which is, I think his athleticism was always an underrated part of his game. So to me, yeah, Nix struggled. There's no doubt about it. There were a couple of throws, especially the one that was over the middle, and then eventually it was going towards the sideline, where before he even threw the ball, Adam Archuleta, who was on the call that game, he just goes, oh no, because he just sees out of the corner of his eye there's 3 Seahawks players already there, and one of them's a safety that is going exactly where the ball is going, and obviously it gets intercepted, and so that ended up being a turnover-worthy play, and I think a lot of the turnover-worthy plays were very worthy of that title for Nix. And it's just, what does Sean Payton now do with this? It was not a good game from him. But in a way, it was almost like, going back to Caleb Williams' thing, kind of the game that you wanted, right? Hey, here's what you can get away with. Now, it kind of sucks because they lost the game by 6, right? They were kind of right there. It felt like Seattle was really controlling that game, and they didn't play really well. It was actually a one-score game in the end. But for Nix specifically, I think it's just going to be a learning curve for him to understand what he can get away with in the NFL. And then in the second half of this season, you might see him and Sean Payton really dial up exactly when to go deep. Not that it has to be something that's on every play, but calculated attacks vertically deep down the field for Nix. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to as his growth of this season kind of continues.
Well, they're in an interesting situation because Nix, probably more than any of the other guys we talked about, needs to be pushed to evolve, right? You mentioned some of the college stuff. I forget the number now. I wish I had it, but I know that he threw to his first read like one of the highest percentages in all of college football last year. Like he was just like, get the snap, get the ball out, the guy's open all the time. It's like their screen rate was crazy. So all the things with him, you're talking about, like he's way more like of a project in terms of some of the stuff you need to do in the NFL. And you really saw that show up in this game. Like they're basically betting on the fact that Bo Nix is like incredibly intelligent, incredibly hardworking, incredibly coachable, and that they can totally reshape him. So I don't even know that there's a bad way to, I mean, obviously like there is from an emotional standpoint, from a soft skills standpoint, probably, but from a football standpoint, you have to figure out what Bo Nix can do. Like if he's just going to be the Oregon Bo Nix, then he's a backup in the NFL. Like that's what he is. And you can point and shoot him, and you can game plan if he has to fill in for a starter who's out due to injury for a game. You can kind of tailor around all the little simple things that he can do well. But if you're going to ever expand him, I mean, they took him in the first round. So they're ready for him to expand, his game to expand and his growth. So that's where some of this is coming from with Peyton. And you could see all the growing pains out there with Bo Nix. Like they're all going to be on display for weeks, probably, at least. All 3 of his turnover worthy throws, I think, in this game were him moving off his first read and having to go to a second read, and basically just kind of, and often from not a good base, but it wasn't like inaccuracy so much as it was just throwing it right to a defender, right? Like these were all like really bad interceptions.
They were bad
so I think
decisions.
some of it is going to be
decisions.
that progression.
Yes, right. No, I'm with you there, and I think that's the interesting case for Bo Nix. Is you mentioned it's hard to quantify or measure like coachability, right? Because we kind of saw flashes from Nix, obviously, when things were going well with his first read. Things look very smooth. He looks like he has the talent to operate. But do you have it in you to take your game to that next level? I think that's going to be a fascinating development to watch.